The story begins by explaining how in this world, some people were blessed with astral power, which granted them special abilities in a small region of the world. However, this phenomenon caused people without magic to start fearing the so-called magicians, sparking a battle between them, the Empire, and the magicians. This is where we are introduced to Iska, a kind of mercenary under the orders of the Empire. Despite belonging to the 12 holy disciples, a few years ago, he freed a witch captured by his comrades from prison, which is why he was now under custody. Luckily, a few years later, Iska was summoned by the members of the Imperial Council, who explained that despite having committed a serious crime, he would be released because his skills would be very useful to them, with the condition that he would have to hunt a witch, a sorceress who was a direct descendant of Nebulus, the first and most powerful witch so far. For this, Iska would have the swords he used to carry in his glory days returned to him. So Iska requested to form his squad with his former companions, and this is where the rest of the team is introduced. Jim, another mercenary who was the sniper, Nene, the engineer, and the captain, who had the role of creating the squad's plans. Anyway, once Iska's old team was back in business, he explained what their mission would be. The guys were shocked and understood better why he had been released. This was because the witch he would face was the famous Ice Calamity, a purebred sorceress who had eliminated hundreds of mercenaries. Despite this, Iska wasn't too worried since he knew it was the only way to stay free. Luckily, the boy had an advantage thanks to his years in prison. Very few magicians knew his skills and the threat he could pose. In any case, a few hours later, they finally arrived at the base, which, according to reports, would be the next target of the witch. Of course, once there, they scouted around to try to find her whereabouts. Luckily, this worked out, because a few hours later, they were intercepted by several mercenaries from the enemy kingdom. So finally, the protagonist could remove the rust from his swords, splitting one of the magical attacks of the attackers in two, who didn't understand how the hell he could do that. Even so, the enemy didn't waste any time and used their numerical advantage to surround the group. However, despite their numerical disadvantage, Iska's team demonstrated why they were unbeatable together. Thanks to the distractions from the engineer, he took out all the enemy mages. But there was no time to celebrate, for seconds later, a powerful witch named Rin appeared. To avoid collateral damage, Iska told the others to move ahead, as he would take care of her, thus initiating the showdown. Although the girl had quite strong Earth-type abilities and a golem, they couldn't compare to Iska's skills. In the end, even though he held back, it didn't take him too much effort to subdue her. However, just as he was about to leave, the witch he had been seeking appeared. Yes, the Ice Calamity Witch, who in seconds used her magical power to turn the entire place into an ice prison. By the way, Rin, the girl, warned her mistress to be careful as the boy's sword could negate magic. Then they started the fight, and it looked like it could go either way. But Iska had only been using one of his swords, so he decided to pull out the second one, with its power to counter and mimic the abilities of mages. This turned the tide of the battle, and he began to take control. As they fought, they realized they both wanted the same thing, to end the war between their nations and bring peace. Still, in a move reminiscent of their past, the boy let the witch escape, fully aware of the potential fallout. He was clearly taken with the girl, and she felt the same way. There was undeniable chemistry between them. Later, we learned the witch's name was Alice, and she was always thinking about Iska. It seems they had a lot in common. Switching back to Iska, he was feeling out of place in his newfound freedom after years in prison. His captain tried to help him relax by giving him tickets to a play in the neutral city, where witches and ordinary people lived together and battles were off limits. But, as luck would have it while enjoying the performance, he bumped into Alice, the earlier witch, who was also taking a break. Fortunately, just as she was about to attack Iska, Rin reminded Alice that they were not allowed to cause trouble there. So Alice backed off but promised Iska they'd meet again soon. Meanwhile, after returning to his territory, Iska was reminded of a witch he'd known before who was quite similar to Alice, and he started to suspect they might be the same person. On the other hand, Alice, who was actually one of the princesses of her kingdom, was summoned by her mother. Her mother revealed that the founding witch, whom I mentioned earlier, was about to awaken. Contrary to what the Empire believed about having eliminated her, they were mistaken, and it was her twin sister who had died in her place. Now the real founder was about to awaken, so it was best not to leave their territory. This was because after so many years asleep, she could be a threat to all sides. But despite her mother's warnings, the girl decided to take a stroll in the neutral city. Once again, she ran into Iska, who was enjoying some of his freedom before the Empire took it away for failing his mission. But unlike last time, they ended up spending the day together, realizing that their ideas were quite alike. Additionally, Alice could see that Iska was different from the soldiers she'd known before. After spending the day together and with Iska falling asleep in her lap, both returned to their reality. Iska was summoned by the Empire's leaders who, contrary to his expectations, didn't call him to take away his freedom. Instead, they congratulated him for being able to fight on equal terms with the ice calamity and even attack the base, which was his main priority. So they offered to restore his title as a holy disciple with one condition: to eliminate Alice. Naturally, he couldn't stop thinking about the proposal. On one hand, he knew he'd need that title to achieve his goal, but on the other, he was unsure about ending someone who didn't seem to be a threat. In the end, to make a decision, he decided to meet the witch again in Neutral City. He asked his captain for permission to miss some missions, to which she agreed, but only if she could accompany him. On the other hand, just like Iska, the princess had done some research about him, discovering that he had been the youngest holy disciple ever recruited but had been taken into custody for freeing a witch. This left Alice quite shocked, as she couldn't understand why a mercenary had released one of her kind. So, to verify this, she told her companion that she would meet Iska one last time. A few days later, this meeting took place, during which the captain was quite stunned to meet the famous Ice Calamity Witch. But once they were in a more private place, the girl asked Iska why he had freed one of her race if he was just another hound of the Empire. To this, he explained that the witch was just a child, and he couldn't allow an innocent person to be eliminated. He further explained that he had only become a disciple to achieve peace and planned to capture a high-ranking witch to negotiate peace with the queen. However, Alice explained that this wouldn't work since her mother would never accept such a treaty, even if she were captured. But she offered another alternative: to join her and become her guard, offering status and power, to work together to try to subdue the Empire and finally establish the peace they both longed for. But before he could respond, they were interrupted by the founding witch who, just as the queen had warned Alice, had managed to wake from her slumber. She wasn't entirely sane, and noticing the presence of Empire members, blinded by rage, she unleashed a powerful attack without caring that people of her own race might be injured. Luckily, the four were able to avoid injury, but Alice quickly tried to reason with her, asking her to calm down. The witch, however, took this as a betrayal and decided to end both her and the Empire's members, launching an overwhelming burst of energy at the princess. Luckily, before the attack landed, Rin intervened to prevent Alice from receiving mortal wounds. However, her condition was quite serious, prompting the protagonist to take part in the altercation. After asking the captain to attend to the girl, he was about to face the witch, who had been attracted to that place by Iska's swords, apparently having once belonged to someone the founding witch knew well. But let's get to the important part: Iska and his battle against the witch. Although he had support from a distance, the power difference between him and the witch was too great, and neither Iska nor his allies could land a single blow. That was until, thanks to an idea from Iska, Alice created an opening for the mercenary to attack with his sword. This proved to be highly effective, and with the sword's anti-magic, the witch lost the power she had gathered since awakening, falling back into the seal that held her captive. Regrettably, after doing so, Iska rejected Alice's proposal, explaining that he couldn't desert his side, meaning they would sadly have to face each other later on. But moving on from the incident, a day later, Iska's squad leader was summoned by the Empire's superiors. This was to inform her of the team's next mission, in which they would have to collaborate with another of the 12 holy disciples, as only these would have the ability to complete it. A few days later, the leader revealed their next mission, explaining that they would have to locate a kind of magical power vortex that had recently appeared. This vortex was quite similar to the one that had granted special abilities to the enemy kingdom, although on a smaller scale. However, they would have to do it before the wizards found it. Otherwise, the wizards would gain more power. On the other hand, just like the holy disciples, Alice had been notified of the appearance of a new vortex, so she would be the one in charge of securing it. However, this time she would have to work alongside this guy over here who belonged to one of the secondary branches of her lineage. Meanwhile, Iska finally arrived at the nearby base where the magical energy had been detected. This time they would have to work in collaboration with several soldiers under the other disciple, like this girl here, Nora, who had teamed up with the captain some time ago. But let's get to the heart of the matter. Once all the men were gathered, the other holy disciple gave more mission details. They would be divided into groups to comb the area until they found the vortex and secured it. Of course, if they couldn't do it before the witches did, their main mission would be to destroy said vortex. Once this was all explained, the mercenaries began a search to find the magical energy. However, after several days, many squads had disappeared without a trace. Despite this, the leader didn't seem to care much, considering everyone there was disposable. Iska tried to confront him, but the guy no longer recognized him as an equal after his betrayal. So Iska's words were in vain. Still, Iska wouldn't leave things as they were and would start his mission to find the missing soldiers. On the other hand, the one who had located the vortex was the princess, although she wasn't the only one. In fact, the masked man from before was the one who had found it. However, he explained that such a vortex only had the capacity to strengthen 2 or 3 mages, so she shouldn't worry. He would be in charge of protecting it until all its mana was extracted, and he also had the help of his niece, who, according to him, had more power than Alice herself.